Hello and welcome to this particular discussion on supply risk management. This is a unit that is going to help you understand various risks that might occur around your supply chain activities, and I believe it's going to be an enlightening discussion. By the end of the discussion, we expect that you're going to be able to define and explain various fundamental concepts that are related to supply chain risks, that you're also going to learn methods and tools to identify and assess supply chain risks. And finally, you will also be able to explore various strategies and tactics to mitigate supply chain risks. For example, what we call risk avoidance, risk reduction, risk transfer, and risk acceptance. Begin, of course, by defining what is this that we are calling supply chain. And it is simply a network of organizations, people, activities, and resources that will be basically involved in creation, production, and delivery of goods and services. So that particular length or those particular aspects that you have just mentioned there will form what we call a chain, because an organization has to be involved. People have to be involved. They may be different clients. They may be people that are going to be using various products, various activities. It could be transportation activities, production activities, and so on and so forth. And when we talk about supply chain risk management, within the network that we have just defined above, we know it is important for us to be able to identify, assess, and mitigate various risks. When you are in the transportation of various goods and services, you may be subjected to certain risks, and it is very, very important to get to know these risks in advance and how to mitigate. Mitigating is how to prevent them from happening. For example, through transportation of goods and services, it could be carjacking, it could be loss or theft of goods that are in transport. So when we study supply chain risk management, then it is important to prepare ourselves against these risks, that the organization does not be able to suffer loss. And you can see also the key thing or the key reason that we are doing that is to avoid interruption of flow of goods, any form of interruption, or prevent the goods from getting to the customer because of the various kinds of risks that I've just mentioned. Now, we have understanding supply chain vulnerabilities, and this simply means weaknesses or areas of exposure within the supply chain. Like I've just said, it could be challenges in transport, it could be poor quality goods from the organization perspective, and so on and so forth. So these vulnerabilities are aspects that we need to try and avoid. Any form of disruptions, financial losses, an activity that would affect the reputation of the organization, and so on and so forth. So as we conduct our supply chain activities, we have to be keen to ensure that even the reputation of the organization is safeguarded as we deliver the goods, as we deliver the services, and so on and so forth. Now, when we assess the supply chain vulnerabilities, we have various considerations that we put in place. The first one is supplier dependence. We need to, this is when organizations are fully relying on a single supplier. And there is the challenge and difficulties of doing that. Most likely, if anything happens and this supplier is not able to deliver the goods, then it means activities are going to stop. and so on and so forth. The other consideration as we look at the vulnerabilities is the geographical concentration. And this is when we focus or when we rely on a supplier that is located on a certain specific region. Regions that have natural disasters. You have had very recently the earthquake that happened in Turkey, a very, very dangerous earthquake that very many people lost their lives. You could also be relying on suppliers that are in regions that have political instability, regions that are experiencing war and other forms of disruptions. We have seen the impact of the war in Ukraine in terms of the countries that depend on Ukraine to deliver certain goods and services. It has been a difficult season for them. So as we consider supply chain vulnerabilities, we also need to be considerate in terms of our concentration with the suppliers. Keen to note also the third one is we need to ensure that the inventory levels that we are maintaining are not inadequate. Because when they are inadequate or when they are less, it means we are exposed to certain supply chain vulnerabilities. And finally is on the transportation and logistics. We need also to avoid over-reliance on specific transportation routes or carriers. A case, for example, is when countries have strikes that the air transport in that particular country is not moving, for example, or employees have gone on strike. So it means all the aeroplanes are grounded and it becomes difficult for that person who has that as the sole dependent in terms of transportation of goods. So it is keen for us to be able to check that and try to avoid. These particular points are emphasizing on the need for us to diversify in terms of transportation, in terms of inventory levels, in terms of the geographical considerations, in terms of supplier dependence. Other considerations are regulatory and compliance risks. When we don't adhere to regulatory requirements, those could be legal issues, it could be taxation issues that we have not met as an organization. That would put us in a lot of problems. And then we also have financial risks. Vulnerabilities can arise from insufficient financial resources. So even as we are in the supply chain sector, we have to ensure that we are financially stable. The weaknesses that are brought about by suppliers not being financially stable, it means they may be unable to deliver certain goods. Like, for example, what happens with very many governments, they expect you to first deliver the goods. It is you to know where you're going to get the finances, then the payment will be effected later. So when you have a weak financial or when you do not have the relevant financial resources, most likely supply and delivery of those particular goods would be difficult in the case, for example, when you are working with the government. We also have issues with the currency exchange rates. We are now having countries experiencing challenges in terms of the dollar currency. It's inadequate. So for those people that depend on supplies that require to import, where you pay in dollars, you realize that will be a difficult engagement for you to have. Now, why do we need then to study supply risk management? That's a very important question that we need to ask ourselves. Number one, we want to ensure that our businesses, our organizations, or the suppliers are resilient and the business continues. So when you are resilient, you can be able to hold on to the challenges that we have just mentioned. If it is currency fluctuations, you are still able to continue in business. The other one is cost reduction when we address potential disruptions. Of course, companies will end up avoiding unexpected expenses associated with supply chain disruptions. Now, we have what we call the types of supply chain risks. We have risks that are associated with the operational risks. That is to do with delays in production, quality issues, and that's why in many countries you're going to find they have organizations that are keen into ensuring quality has been achieved, especially for consumables, where customers may end up losing their lives because whatever they consumed was not checked in terms of quality. The other one is inadequate production or distribution capacity to meet the demand. So this is a major risk. We may be having a huge demand for certain products, and then you realize that companies do not have the capacity. And then it becomes very difficult for the entity or the institution to continue to execute their mandate. And then we have what we call supply risks. This is contributed by financial instability, bankruptcy. Bankruptcy is where you do not have cash to be able to run your activities. Other forms of disruptions, like we have just discussed previously, natural disasters, transportation accidents. When an accident occurs and maybe goods were on transit, that is a risk that we had not foreseen when we were releasing these particular goods. And that's why we are saying that it's going to disrupt the supply chain. And then we also have demand risks. For instance, rapid changes in customer demand. So this really occurs for the goods and services where these items are seasonal. So it becomes difficult for you to be able to continue producing more, maybe because the demand for that particular good or item has decreased. Now, while assessing various risks, we could have what we call quantitative and also qualitative risks. And these particular methods of assessment are key because they help us to evaluate and analyze various risks in the supply chain. And for you to choose which particular method to use, whether quantitative or qualitative, it is you to be able to identify on the specific requirements and the nature of the risk that your supply chain or organization is exposed to. Now, when we talk about quantitative risk assessment, number one, what you need to know about this kind of risk assessment is, of course, it is numerical in nature. It is objective and numerical. Yeah, so we need to have you working around figures to be able to identify probable risks. So we can do calculations around probability to be able to access or assess those particular risks. And then we also have this kind of risk assessment is also data driven. So we would practically be relying a lot on historical data, statistical analysis, mathematical models, and so on and so forth. And also we have measurable results. Quantitative assessments will always provide a way that we can be able to measure results. For example, if it's something to do with monetary loss, we can practically be able to say how much did we lose. Maybe because an accident happened, maybe we had a loss of goods along the way. So through this method, we can be able to assess the probability of loss and what we need to do. And then when we talk about the qualitative risk assessment, we are looking at it being subjective and descriptive. So we can describe what we think about the probable risk in terms of giving our subjective judgments. And then also we can also rely on expert opinions. Maybe we have people that have participated in supply chain risk management activities. They can give us an expert opinion of what they think or the probability of risk. And also it is also a very simple method to use, and it is also very quick to be able to conduct. We also have what we call risk mapping and categorization. And we are saying these are very, very essential tools in risk management that are going to help the organization identify, assess, prioritize risks effectively. So these particular techniques are very, very important because they provide a structured and a visual representation of risks that are, of course, going to make it very easy to make informed decisions and allocate resources appropriately. So when we talk about risk maps, then we can have in mind what we call the Geographic Information System, GIS maps. So it's a form of technology that is going to integrate geographical data and risk allowing organizations to analyze risks in specific locations. So this particular method will be useful for assessing environmental, natural disasters, and location-based risks. And then we have what we call process flow diagrams. These process-related risks, creating a flow diagrams can help illustrate the flow of materials, information. So we look at the flow of activities within an organization. Then we can be able to draw a chart. We can also call it a flow chart that is going to show all the activities. Now, in between these activities, we can be able to identify what is the likely risk in a particular activity. And then, of course, once we get to note that, we can now be able to decide or come up with certain risks that we might face in that particular scenario. Now, it is also very important as we study supply risk management also to understand the concept of risk categorization. And this is going to involve grouping similar risks into categories. Remember, we have a wide array of risks. We could have political risks, socio-cultural risks, legal risks. So what we are emphasizing on risk categorization, then we can categorize or put these particular risks in classes. And of course, we can maybe look at common characteristics. And of course, this is going to assist us to simplify the risk management process. This particular way of dealing with risk is very, very important when you are dealing with big organizations that would be exposed to very, very many risks. Now, as we categorize risks, we can have different categories. For example, we can have what we call operational ones, and we say that these ones are related to day-to-day operation. It could be things like process failures. Maybe our systems have failed. That is a risk because that particular day means we may not be able to conduct our activities as we intended. And then we also have human errors. Those are errors that are caused by human beings. It could be maybe a mistake when we are mixing certain kind of chemicals that we intend to have them give us a final product. We can also have equipment breakdowns. We can also have supply chain disruptions. Maybe our transport activities have been disrupted. All those could be called operational risks. Then we have financial risks, issues to do with currency fluctuations, like what I just explained that is happening with the dollar in various countries. Credit risk, liquidity issues. We could be having issues with our cash flow. Then we also have another category where we call strategic risk. Of course, this is going to arise based on various strategic decisions and external factors that we have made. Market dynamics, the market might change. Remember, we just mentioned about the demand. So the demand might change. Issues to do with competition. We could have other players offering the same goods and services that are coming into the organization and thus affecting our activities. And also compliance risks. These, of course, will be because of us not complying with certain laws, not complying with certain regulations. It could be laws around taxation. It could be laws around quality that we need to meet and we have not met. This is going to put us into very big penalties. I just saw one of the companies that decided to use people's images without their consent in one of the countries, and they were fined millions of dollars because of that. So there is currently laws on data protection that we need to be keen on. So those are various categorization. Now, based on that categorization, then it is important to understand what we call mitigation strategies. Mitigation is how to avoid the kind of risks that I've just highlighted there. So we could have things to do with diversification. So we need to diversify a supplier base by working with multiple suppliers. We did emphasize that as we were starting on the need to have very many suppliers that you depend on. So that's what we mean by diversification. We need to avoid in the supply chain activities depending on one supplier. Then, of course, we need to do supplier performance monitoring. So we need to monitor our suppliers. We have what we call key performance indicators that we need to have. So after a certain duration, maybe we can be able to sit down and conduct an evaluation and ask ourselves whether our suppliers have met our set key performance indicators. We can also have the strategy where we share the risk or risk sharing. And this comes in hand when we are doing contract negotiations. We can know between the supplier and the buyer of the goods who is responsible for what, so that one person does not carry maybe the burden or a mistake of the other. If it is myself who is receiving the goods from you, the supplier, then what is my role when I am unpacking the goods? Maybe there could be items that are breakable. Then I do not hold them the way they are supposed to be held. So whose mistake is that if an item breaks? Those are questions that need to be very clear in supply contracts. Failure to which we will have a lot of blame games, we will have we will have people not happy with each other simply because we did not do risk sharing. We did not negotiate whose risk or who among the parties involved in the supply chain is supposed to do what. And then also we have collaborative problem solving. So in this one, we collaborate closely with suppliers to be able to identify and address potential risks. So it means we need to have regular engagements between the receiver of the goods or the buyers of the goods and the suppliers. Then we have what we call risk avoidance strategies. We can do supplier termination. That means we cease all our operations with a particular supplier. Of course, it depends to the extent on which that relationship cannot be redone. So we completely terminate our engagements with that particular supplier. We are just also trying to avoid problems in the future. And also sourcing changes. We can change the source of the supply. We can maybe transition to other supplies. Like we emphasized on the issue of geographical location. We can look for other geographical areas where we can get similar goods. And then we also have a product or service substitution. That is where we replace a supplier's product or service with an alternative that poses fewer risks. Yeah, so we need to look for other products that we can substitute with. That means we need to know in mind, if supplier X fails, where am I going to get a particular item? Do we have any other source? And that enables us to be keen when we are doing it. We also have what we call supplier contractual risk management. And this comes in handy when we are using contractual agreements and provisions to be able to identify, allocate, mitigate, and manage risks associated with various suppliers. And we are saying it is very, very important to ensure effective supplier contractual risk management. And this is going to assist us to protect our organization from potential disruptions, losses, legal liabilities, and so on and so forth. And then we have various strategies that we can use for managing supplier contractual risks. So one of the strategies is risk identification, where we begin by identifying potential risks associated with the suppliers. So this is information that we could get maybe from other people that use the same suppliers. We can confirm the lead time, the delivery challenges. It could be supply disruptions. Maybe we have a problem around the transportation of goods, quality issues, and also clear and comprehensive contracts. So when we are engaging any supplier, it is very, very important to have detailed contracts that can be able to enable each player that is in the supply chain to execute their mandate without taking the blame to any other person. So these contracts will specify rights, responsibilities, and expectations of both parties. And then we have performance standards and quality control. We need to have specific performance standards, quality requirements, and also have key performance indicators within the contract. It is also very, very important for us to understand the concept of inventory management for risk reduction. And we are saying inventory management will play a very crucial role in supply chain risk reduction. And it plays a crucial role in the sense that it is going to help organizations to prepare for and mitigate various types of risks. So every organization needs to have an effective inventory management strategy, which is going to help you maintain business continuity and supply chain disruptions, reduce lead times. Lead time is the period between when you order and when you receive the goods. So are you ready to work with a supplier who takes maybe 60 days or 90 days to deliver the good once you have ordered? That's what we call lead time. And also, if you are able to cope with that, are you able to manage what we call demand fluctuations? A very, very important concept that assists us in inventory management. It is now the concept of what we call just-in-time method. Now, just like the name suggests, just in time, the aim of this particular method is to be able to minimize inventory levels, while we also ensure that the goods that are being produced only when they are needed. So just in time is a very interesting concept. If it is production of goods that we are looking at, we only manufacture or produce when a customer orders. And the same case, you as a supplier, you don't order very many goods to just come lie at your warehouse or in your store or in your business. Just in time concept emphasizes for you to place an order when you need that particular item. And that's why we are saying that the primary goal of just in time, or what we call JIT, is to be able to eliminate waste in production processes and also reduce carrying costs associated with the excess inventory, and also improve overall efficiency, operational efficiency. This is a very, very important concept that I also invite you to think about it, research more about it, see how various organizations are utilizing the just-in-time method to be able to carry out their activities. So we have various characteristics of just-in-time method. Number one, it is demand-driven. That is what we have just said, that production or procurement activities are triggered by actual customer orders. I believe I've just mentioned that previously. Minimal inventory. The JIT aims to maintain the minimum amount of inventory necessary to meet customer demand and also reduced lead times. JIT requires shorter lead time for suppliers to deliver materials and components, and also quality focus. That just in time will also place a strong emphasis on quality. So you cannot afford to compromise on quality if an actual customer places an order, like we have just said in number one. You have to be very, very keen when you are using the just-in-time method. We have another method we call the safety stock method. We can also call it the buffer stock. And we are saying it's a strategic inventory management approach where an organization maintains extra inventory beyond what is required to meet immediate customer demand. So in safety stock method, you have extra stock. Remember, because of the risks that we had just mentioned, you might find yourself in a situation where your supplier is not able to deliver, but you have a buffer stock, so you have something in extra. So your customers will not experience any shortage or any delay, because when you are ordering, you ordered in large quantities. Look at a situation like, for example, when we had COVID-19, we have companies that even survived that particular season. Maybe in terms of financial ability, they had already enough to still keep them running. In terms of stock, maybe there are those that had enough stock. If they were depending on imports before we had those lockdowns, maybe they received enough to sustain them for a particular period of time. Now, when you have safety stock, there are certain benefits that you enjoy. Number one, you are able to ensure you mitigate various risks. Your customers will end up being satisfied, and also you will have improved service levels, and also you will be able to diversify in terms of risks. We have what we call also technology and data analytics in risk management. So risk management or supply chain risk management is important because we can make it better by adopting technology. And that's why we are saying it plays a crucial role in management by providing organizations with tools and insights needed to identify, assess, mitigate, monitor risks within the supply chain. So why is this technology very important when you are monitoring risks? You are able to ensure collection and aggregation of various amounts of data within internal and external sources. This technology is also going to ensure continuous improvement by providing data-driven insights that help organizations refine and manage various strategies. Big data analytics for supply chain risks. So big data analytics can be a powerful tool for managing and mitigating supply chain risks. So we need to take advantage or leverage on volumes of data from various sources. Organizations can gain valuable insights, make informed decisions, and also they can proactively respond to potential risks and disruptions. Now, how is the big data analytics can it be applied in supply chain risk management? Number one is we utilize big data analytics to identify and assess potential risks across the supply chain. So the big data analytics can assist us to identify risks. The other one is they are able to employ predictive analytics models to forecast supply chain risks. So using data analytics, we can be able to analyze various historical data. It could be supply data. We also have current market conditions. Number three, we can be able to implement real-time monitoring systems that continually track supply chain data and provide alerts. And finally, using big data analytics, we can be able to evaluate risk profiles of your suppliers. Remember, this is simply embracing technology within our supply chain activities. Global supply chain risks. These are risks that are faced by companies globally when sourcing materials. We have quite a number of them. We have political instability. We did mention that when we were starting, issues to do with trade disputes. Countries can dispute maybe because of changes in tariffs, sanctions, where countries put a stop to supply of certain goods, and changes in government policies. When government changes, remember also any other government that is coming in place can also be able to change its policies. So they can favor or fail to favor you when you are in the supply chain activities. And also economic fluctuations, issues to do with the currency exchange rate volatility, issues to do with inflation, where we have persistent increase in prices of goods and services. We have issues around recessions can impact the cost of goods, and also reliance on suppliers in different regions exposes the organization to risk of supplier failures. We did mention on the need for you to diversify. So it is a risk when you are singly depending on a single supplier. And finally, we have risks that are contributed by disruptions in transportation networks, closure of ports, strikes, and so many other risks. So we could also have extra risks, things to do with social cultural risks. That is contributed by the social life of individuals within a particular country, and so on and so forth. So these global supply chain risks are not exhaustive. I invite you also to carry out research more on these risks, be able to identify more, and see also on how we can be able to solve those risks or mitigate those risks. So that will bring us to the end of that particular session. I also invite you to do more research on the areas discussed. I believe that it has been an eye-opener listening to this particular discussion.